there anybody else besides Micah? Alright, you ready?
One year, when I was a young boy, on Christmas Day, I found under the tree a package. It was, I remember, one of the smallest packages under the tree. In the package was The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. These books by J.R. Tolkien are two of the most read works of literature in Western civilization, yet frequently the necessary element of Christianity that is contained in them is ignored. In an interview with American scholar and author Clyde S. Kilby, Tolkien commented, "I am a Christian, and of course what I write will be from that essential viewpoint." This quote reveals to us how Tolkien himself perceived his work. I have long been an admirer of Tolkien's writings and enjoy the aesthetics with which he saturates his stories. This speech will explain how Christianity is an essential element in The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. First, we will examine the man himself, and then we will observe an aspect of his work. And lastly, we will explore a hidden yet vital theme in his writings. J.R. Tolkien's belief that man's purpose is to glorify God greatly influenced his writings. In a letter to a young girl by the name of Camilla Unwin, Tolkien writes, "The chief purpose of life for any of us is to increase, according to our capacity, our knowledge of God, and to be moved by it to praise and thanks." Tolkien believed that one way to glorify God is by imitating God's artistry. He called it subcreation. Tolkien's personal subcreation was creating a mythology for Middle-earth. Though neither The Hobbit nor The Lord of the Rings are allegorical, the art of symbolism is very prominent throughout the stories. In a letter to Deborah Webster in 1958, Tolkien gave a short description of a few, quote, significant facts about himself, where he said, "More important, I am a Christian, which can be deduced from my writings." The word deduced is very important. The Christian symbolism in Tolkien's stories is found by deduction, since he does not provide straight allegory. The most basic symbolism present in the stories is the war between good and evil. The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings' clear portrayal of good and evil is one of the most obvious characteristics, but also one of the most important. Before Tolkien and his good friend C.S. Lewis, there was very little fantasy that distinctly depicted the struggle between good and evil. In Humphrey Carpenter's A Biography, Carpenter records a conversation where Lewis remarks to Tolkien, "Tollers, there's too little of what we really like in stories. I'm afraid we shall have to try and write some ourselves." This conversation led to a creation of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, stories that provide a very real portrayal of the struggle between good and evil that is present in our world. In an interview with Colin Durez by Desiring God, Durez remarks, "Certainly, there's a sense that events are not just based on luck. But even though there's real difficulties and dangers and possibility of death, soon, in the end, you see that a pattern is being unfolded in the larger battle between good and evil." Following Durez's remarks, we see in these stories characters such as Gandalf, a mysterious figure and powerful warrior conquering orcs, goblins, and balrogs. But we also see an evil demon by the name of Sauron, who seeks the destruction of everything that is good. Yet the story is not as simple as men and elves representing the side of good, or goblins and orcs representing the side of evil. There are more complex themes, such as corruption of original nature, struggle with temptation, and brokenness. Throughout the narrative, though, we see touches of hope beyond the war through small glimpses of providence. In both The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, certain acts of providence can be clearly seen and are necessary to the narrative's outcome. In The Hobbit, at the end of Bilbo's journey, there is a discourse between Gandalf and Bilbo. Then the prophecies of the old songs have turned out to be true after a fashion, said Bilbo. "Of course," said Gandalf, "and why should they not prove true? Surely you don't disbelieve the prophecies because you had a hand in bringing them about yourself. You don't really suppose, do you, that all your adventures and escapes were managed by mere luck, just for your sole benefit?" This last remark by Gandalf reveals that behind Bilbo's adventure there was a plan at work, and that it was not chance that caused everything to happen the way that it did. In Chapter 2, Volume 1 of The Lord of the Rings, Frodo is distraught that the evil of the ring has fallen on him, and Gandalf reassures him, saying, "Behind that there was something else at work, beyond any design of the ringmaker. I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, in which case you also were meant to have it, and that may be an encouraging thought." As Gandalf states, there is throughout the story glimpses of someone else at work, causing and purposing the events of the narrative. Gandalf, a very mysterious figure indeed, often hints at providence by using such words as chosen. The most obvious example occurs at the end of The Lord of the Rings, where only providential intervention completes the mission to destroy the ring. If you have read the book, then you know to what I am referring. If you have not read it, then you shall have to do so to find out. We've taken this journey in order to understand how Christianity is an essential element in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. We have done this by examining the author himself, observing one of the most basic aspects of his story, and exploring an important theme throughout his tale. I think it is important to understand the elements of any work of literature, but The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are two of the most important because of the depth and complexity that they contain. Tolkien created a myth that he intended to convey truth. This truth is what makes a story worth reading. If perhaps you have seen the element of Christianity in Tolkien's writings in a new light today, or you have not read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, then I would definitely recommend that you do so for yourself and find the magic that they contain.